Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar about caregiver stress and healthy living. My name is Juliana Valencia and I'm a caregiver support specialist with Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. You should have received an email this morning with the speaker slides, so you'll have them for future reference. It's not necessary for you to have those slides open during the presentation because you will be able to see them. You can ask a question at any time during today's presentation by typing it into the question box on your panel. And today's presentation is going to be recorded, and a recording will be sent to all registrants by early next week. There will be a brief survey as you signed out, so please help us by giving us your feedback. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Christine Martin. Christine is a certified case manager and a lead case manager with ElderLink, and she has been serving older adults and their loved ones for over 10 years. Now, Christine has worked primarily with the Respite Care program and is a co-facilitator for a caregiver education and support program called Caring for You, Caring for Me. Outside of work, Christine enjoys spending time with her husband and their 3 children, and is helping her family as they navigate long-distance caregiving with her grandmother in New York. Kristen is going to share her knowledge with us today. Thank you, Kristen, and welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Juliana, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So as Juliana shared, my name is Kristen, and I'm a case manager with ElderLink, part of a public-private partnership with Inova Health System and the Fairfax Area Agency on Aging. Our mission at ElderLink is twofold. The first is to support the safety and independence of older adults living in their own home, and the second is to support family caregivers in their caregiving role. So through the nature of my work, I'm working with caregivers on a regular basis, and through that professional experience, as well as through my own personal family experiences, I've certainly come to appreciate a caregiver's journey. Oh, bear with me, just trying to advance here. Let's see. All right, sorry, folks. All right, here we go. So over the years, I've worked with families who have been in varying stages of their caregiving journey. And each family that I encounter is unique in terms of dynamics, personality, culture, and values. And it has been very interesting for me to observe along the way that a caregiving situation that works well for one family may not have the same desired result with the next family. The same holds true when thinking about the individual caregiver. One caregiver might find providing personal care to a loved one to be no big deal, but handling the financial paperwork is a very overwhelming process, or vice versa. And then another caregiver may feel fine handling all of the above, but gets stressed out because of what is perceived to be interference from other family members. The bottom line is that caregiving in general can be extremely demanding, draining, and exhausting, both physically and emotionally. And often we struggle with perfectionism and expect perfect performance from ourselves in all areas of our lives, including caregiving. But usually caregiving is not perfect by nature. And as almost any seasoned caregiver will tell you, it's based on trial and error, determining what works best for each stage of care. While trying to do our best, we must be willing to give ourselves the gift of grace and realistically expect that only hindsight will be 20/20. More than likely, there will be some regrets in our caregiving journey, but keep in mind that you made the best decision you could with the information or situation at hand. However, the worst regret often comes from those decisions, reactions, and feelings that come from exhaustion and stress. Again, caregiving is an extremely tough job, and you need to take permission, give yourself that permission for you to be good to you. Our objectives for today are to first recognize the symptoms and understand the causes of caregiver stress, and then to learn different coping strategies to help make you a healthier caregiver. The overall goal is to really walk away with a true appreciation of how self-care is an absolute must in a healthy caregiving relationship. All right, so here's a trivia question. who said there are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and that was said by former First Lady Rosalind Carter. And that sentiment clearly paints the picture that in one capacity or another, all of us will be touched by caregiving at some point in our lives. The National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP published a research report titled Caregiving in the US, which came out recently. It was May of 2020. And the results help to provide a quick snapshot of unpaid family caregivers. And from these stats, you can see how you might fit into the big picture. So just a tad over 21% of the population has provided care to an adult or a child with special needs in the past 12 months. That's roughly about 53 million Americans, up from 43.5 million Americans in 2015. If we narrow in on caregivers for adults only, we're looking at just over 19% of the population, which is an increase from the 2015 stat of just under 17% of the population. So that's approximately an increase of over 8 million caregivers between 2015 and 2020. About 61% of caregivers are female, 39% male. Average age of a caregiver is 49.4 years with a median age of 51. Most caregivers at 76% care for just one person, while 24% care for 2 or more adults. The average duration of caregiving is 4.5 years, but roughly 1/3 of caregivers are providing care for 5 years or more. What is very clear is that society's need for caregivers will only continue to increase as advancements in healthcare have contributed to a longer lifespan, really making the necessity of family caregivers even more critical. Accepting the title of caregiver is an important distinction to make because all too often, people may not readily identify as a caregiver. So they may view the tasks they are helping their loved one with just as being part of the role you play within that given relationship, whether it be as a spouse, partner, adult child, friend, or neighbor. And it is so important to identify as a caregiver so you feel more comfortable accessing the potential resources that are available to provide you with support on your caregiving journey. Why we earn the title of caregiver varies. So for some of us, it was a conscious and deliberate choice to become caregiver, part of an ongoing relationship with our loved one. And for others, maybe we assumed this role because there wasn't anyone else to provide care, or maybe we were identified by others as a primary caregiver. Interestingly, the AARP research report, Caregiving in the US, found that 53% of caregivers felt they had no choice in helping to provide care to their loved one. In these situations, it's really important to make the conscious effort to focus on the positives of your caregiving journey, despite the negative feelings or sense of burden that you may be experiencing at times, in order to see the silver lining. How we were introduced into the world of caregiving can be very impactful to our journey as well. So for some of us, it may be a very gradual introduction to caregiving. Maybe your loved one is experiencing some age-related changes and you're stepping in to provide help in those areas where assistance is needed. Or maybe your loved one has been diagnosed with a certain illness, and the nature of the progression of that condition gives you the opportunity to ease into your caregiving role. The duties you perform really don't impact you too much in the beginning, but gradually increase over time to potentially being needed 24/7. Or maybe this caregiving role came out of left field and you did not anticipate that certain health situations or other circumstances would occur to suddenly and unexpectedly put you in this caregiver role. Whatever the extenuating circumstance that created the situation of your loved one needing a caregiver, you and your loved one are on a unique journey together. As I mentioned, each family has its own unique culture, and each person in that family has their own unique set of values, ideals, and preferences. Caregiving is by no means a one-size-fits-all approach to managing care. However, although each of us as caregivers are on our own unique path, there are certain elements that can help to make this caregiving journey feel more manageable as we prioritize caring for ourselves as caregivers. Ensuring that you are caring for yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually is fundamentally imperative to making sure that you are physically, emotionally, and spiritually present to care for your loved one. So what is caregiver stress? Not taking care of yourself often contributes to the stress that caregivers feel and may add to issues you are experiencing with your physical, mental, and emotional health. So stress in general was described by a physiologist named Hans Selye back in the 1950s. And he described stress as the non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it. Over the years, others have added on to that description, essentially describing how the body adapts to both pleasant and unpleasant demands. Our reaction to stress is most certainly emotional, but there is just as much of a physical reaction as well. And stress can really get under the skin to cause a whole host of negative repercussions. Caregiver stress specifically is the negative impact that caregiving can have on your physical and mental health, and it can have the ripple effect of spilling over into other life domains, such as family life and work. So let's take a look at some of the symptoms of caregiver stress. Common symptoms of stress include isolating, so spending less time with family and friends, increased negative feelings, feeling overwhelmed or chronically worried or anxious, changes in sleep patterns, experiencing that ripple effect of secondary stress in family and work life, issues with short-term memory, so maybe difficulty staying focused or making decisions, headaches, body aches and pains, changes in weight, and using alcohol or other substances to help you cope to get through the day. All right, we're going to take a look at some of the primary causes of stress in caregiving. And as we know, caregiving is hard work and it takes a lot of energy. So some of the causes include unrealistic demands on yourself, fear and uncertainty about the future. Caregiving can feel very unpredictable at times. No time for yourself, changes in relationship roles, less opportunities for socialization, behavioral changes in your loved one, potential impacts on your career and finances, and negative emotions and feelings. Looking at this list, there are many causes to caregiver stress, and this is certainly not an all-inclusive list. If we were completing this list on our own, it would probably look a little different for everyone. The physical and emotional demands of caring for a loved one, let alone behavioral changes that are sometimes experienced, is often a big stressor for a lot of folks. Again, as caregivers, we want to make our loved one well, and it is not always easy to accept that there are some things you just cannot fix. I'd like to highlight in a little more detail some of the other common stressors that caregivers often share. Conflicting priorities. Conflicting demands are inevitable in caregiving and are common causes of stress. Trying to meet the needs of your loved one needing care, as well as the needs of other loved ones in your life, plus maybe the demands of work and school, it's a lot. And trying to juggle all these balls in the air at once creates stress and conflict. Ambiguity of roles can also tie into this. So not knowing quite how your role of caregiver meshes in your pre-existing relationship of husband-wife or adult-child-parent or any other combination can be really uncomfortable as you navigate these shifting dynamics in your relationships. Denial of own needs. So what typically happens is we cut back on ourselves. Something's got to give, and my needs are the easiest thing to deny. And why is it that if I do prioritize myself, that somehow it makes me feel like I am selfish, uncaring, and certainly less than perfect? Even if I know rationally that I have to be healthy and strong to provide healthy and strong care, our own needs go on the back burner. We're all familiar with the airplane emergency instructions that you need to put on your own mask before you put on the mask of loved ones in your care, because you can't help them if you can't breathe yourself. Now, that may seem like a dramatic comparison on the surface, but if you don't attend to your own needs, you might still be going through the motions of caregiving, but at great cost to yourself. Isolation. So given the physical distancing we are all experiencing right now, the feeling of isolation may be even more intense. Providing care can be a really lonely job, particularly if you are the primary caregiver. According to the research report, Caregiving in the US, 1 in 5 caregivers agree or strongly agree with the statement, "I feel alone." Some really interesting additional data came from that research report. So 29% of caregivers who live with the care recipient report feeling alone, compared to just 16% for those not living with the care recipient. And those caring for a spouse or partner reported feeling more alone than caring for someone else. So 29% versus 20%. As a caregiver, it is easy to feel isolated and solely responsible for providing care and making tough decisions. It's also easy to feel unappreciated and misunderstood. And this is why it is so important to create your support circle of people who you can vent to, people who you can connect with, to help you feel less alone. At this point in time with COVID, there may be the need to stay a little more physically distant, but you can still try to remain socially and emotionally connected. If you are feeling alone in your journey, really think about the possibility of a support group. As support groups help to bring people together who are facing a similar experience, connecting with these other people can help reduce your sense of isolation and may help you understand what to expect on your journey based on a fellow caregiver's perspective. Through the bonding that occurs, caregivers are provided with the opportunity to share personal experiences and feelings, as well as coping strategies. You might learn some practical tips for how to manage on a day-to-day basis, and you are also in the position of helping others better cope with their caregiving situation. Some of the stories you hear may inspire you to become a better caregiver, and other stories may help you appreciate that things could be worse. Even more important than that, though, your fellow caregivers can help give you encouragement and provide you with support. And all of us need support, but especially caregivers. My organization, ElderLink, offers a telephonic caregiver support call the second Tuesday of each month from 7 to 8 p.m. And this is really such a great option for those who would like to try connecting with others, but the feasibility of actually getting out of the home to attend a support group is sometimes a little more tricky. So a wide range of emotions usually comes along with the territory of caregiving. If you pause to think about it, there will probably be a handful of positive emotions that come to mind, but usually the negative ones are the ones that tend to filter to the surface first, and that's okay. It's important to recognize that these stress-causing factors are inherently built into one point of caregiving or another, so they're part of every single caregiving relationship. And if you recognize these negative feelings, you should. They're normal and unavoidable if you are providing care. These negative emotions are often our stress response to a stressful caregiving situation. All right, so what are some of these emotions? Who thinks frustration is built into caregiving? Absolutely. It is so normal to feel overwhelmed trying to do too much with too little. Despite our best intentions, we are limited in our financial resources, the number of hours in our day, the limits of our own physical strength and endurance. We also encounter hurdles related to the limitations of our loved one's environment, such as stairs, maybe chairs that are hard to get up from, beds that are hard to get into and out of. And while there are devices and services that can help to solve many of these problems, we circle back to limited financial resources. So frustrating. Limited knowledge and expertise regarding the actual disease or disability of our loved one is also a compounding factor. And that's where the hindsight really kicks in, as we become medical specialists, whether we want to or not. Grief. So we usually associate grief with the passing of someone we love, but we also grieve when our loved one is physically sick or develops cognitive changes. Caregivers grieve over the loss of life they used to share with their loved one as the lifestyle and relationship changes. And it can be a slow grief over the ambiguous loss or change with your loved one. There's not necessarily a sense of closure. Grief can sometimes come across as denial with what is actually happening. It can sometimes be anger. It can also be bargaining. If you make him or her feel better today, then I'll feel happy. Guilt. All right, so oftentimes caregivers feel guilty about some of the negative emotions they are experiencing. It can feel like we are betraying our loved ones, or maybe a sign that we don't love them as much anymore, but that is certainly not the case. Guilt can also be a major stress-causing factor, as the care you provide may not always meet your expectations. As I said, we often expect perfect performance from ourselves, and that can sometimes make us feel inadequate as a caregiver if we are not meeting those high standards that we've set up for ourselves. On top of that, our caregiving hat is usually not the only hat we wear. Many times we find it hard to forgive ourselves for less than perfect performance in one area of our lives, even if we perform pretty close to perfect in another. This causes a ripple effect that impacts our job performance, parenting our own kids, our relationship with our spouse or significant other, and our friendships and other meaningful relationships that also need our time and attention. Depression is often one of the most difficult emotions for caregivers, and studies have shown that about half of all caregivers have reported symptoms of depression during their caregiving journey. It's important to note that depression is not the same as stress. As we discussed earlier, stress is our response to a specific situation, and it comes and goes. Depression lingers. It's a heavy feeling that follows you around for days, weeks, months at a time. When your normal coping strategies are no longer working, or if they are only providing you with a small window of relief, then it's an indication that it's becoming a problem. When you couple that heavy feeling with other symptoms, such as loss of interest or pleasure in doing things you previously enjoyed, loss of appetite or overeating, too little or too much sleep, feeling hopeless about the future, inability to concentrate or trouble remembering, sometimes even body pains and aches, and these have been present for 2 consecutive weeks, it's time to seek help. So talk with your primary care provider, a counselor, maybe someone from your place of worship, or even a close friend to let them know how you are feeling. Many caregivers wait longer than they should before seeking help. It again goes back to putting our own needs on the back burner. Untreated depression will affect your quality of life though, as it takes a toll on your physical and emotional well-being, and you will also not be as effective a caregiver for your loved one. The good news is that there are a variety of effective ways to treat depression, so please put that value on your well-being and seek help. On the other side of the coin, not dealing with caregiver stress can put you at risk for stress overload or caregiver burnout. And the probable result of a caregiver who is not taking care of himself or herself is caregiver burnout. Burnout is the process that results when excessive demands placed on your energy, strength, and resources leads to exhaustion. You're simply worn out, you're scraping the bottom of the bucket. I've listed some real concrete symptoms of stress overload or burnout. When burnout reaches a critical level, it starts to become very apparent in a caregiver's life. It's important to familiarize yourself and watch for these signs in yourself and your fellow caregivers. Empower yourself and seek professional help, a doctor, a counselor, or reach out to a member of your support system. All right, so what can we do to help reduce caregiver stress? First, it's very important to recognize and acknowledge that providing care places very real and very tough demands on you. So there are the physical demands to meet basic needs and the emotional demands of stress and worry. It's also important to acknowledge what are the expectations of caregiver, the expectations that you place on yourself, the expectations of the family, and the expectations of your loved one receiving care. I've mentioned that there's often the tendency for caregivers to become super focused on the needs of their loved one while putting their own needs on the back burner. By doing this, you can become neglectful of your own needs and may not care for yourself as well as you could be, which can contribute to feelings of stress and also cause problems with your own emotional, mental, and physical health. Caring for yourself is absolutely fundamentally necessary in order to be an effective and healthy caregiver for your loved one. You need to find a way to refresh and replenish yourself. And this is going to look a little different for everyone, figuring out what recharges you. The American Medical Association publishes the Caregiver Self-Assessment Survey, and the purpose of this tool is to help you identify if you might be experiencing a high degree of distress in helping to care for your loved one. The self-assessment provides you with the opportunity to assess how you are doing. You know, we often neglect to ask how our caregivers are doing and may take for granted what sacrifices are being made in order for the caregiver to assume that role. This assessment can really help to get that dialogue going with your doctor or even members of your support system. It's important to take the time to do a self-inventory to honestly assess your strengths and the kinds of things you enjoy doing. Then try to match those things with the caregiving tasks that you can do well, that you can do easily, or that you enjoy. All of the other tasks, consider delegating them out. Give them away. You know you have limited resources, so let's use them wisely by delegating out the tasks that you find to be the most difficult or undesirable, and keep the tasks that you can realistically provide. And then reassess, 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 because the needs of your loved one are always changing and your needs are always changing too. So let's talk about some ways to help alleviate caregiving stress. Caregivers can help to take care of themselves in these 4 primary ways. So dealing with emotions, utilizing coping skills, accepting help and support, and seeing the humor. And paying attention to these areas of your life can help to alleviate stress and prevent burnout. All right, dealing with negative emotions. So as we discussed earlier, caregivers experience a wide range of emotions related to caregiving. The reasons why we may experience these negative emotions are many. So it might be to unmet needs, poor coping skills, and certainly major difficulties associated with our caregiving circumstances. So the question is, how do we prevent or free ourselves from these negative emotions that make us feel bad? The first thing we need to do is recognize and acknowledge these negative emotions, and then accept that they are real and common human reactions. So I want you to try thinking of your emotions like a beach ball, and now imagine trying to hold that beach ball underwater. So with some effort, you can keep that beach ball submerged for a bit of time, but the longer you try to keep that beach ball underwater, the greater the explosion will be once it finally comes to the surface. The same usually holds true for our emotions. It's important to take responsibility for our own feelings, as well as to identify the source of our feelings. Why is it that you are feeling resentful or guilty or inadequate whatever the emotion may be. An important step is being able to express your emotions and letting others know how difficult things may be for you in the moment or in those collective moments. Overcoming these negative emotions is not a one and done achievement. They will most likely creep back in, and you need to figure out how you can best cope with these emotions when they do return. And to best cope, you need to develop a collection of different coping skills that you can apply as the situation calls for it. Coping can be thought of how we find ways to manage situations that we find harmful or stressful. And the best copers are usually those who have a variety of coping skills, and they are flexible in gearing their responses to the situation. Many of us know all too well that what works well one day may not work so well the next. So the need to remain flexible in our approach is fundamentally key. Copers usually tend to keep the big picture in mind with a more positive outlook, and they try to be more proactive rather than reactive in order to maintain control as best they can. To be a good coper means to have skills in the following areas: so stress management, time management, decision making, and lifestyle management. So stress management may include exercising, and the goal should be 30 minutes a day, but it's perfectly fine to break that into smaller chunks of maybe 10 minutes 3 times a day. Talking to someone about your worries and concerns. So sharing what you're going through with others can be very therapeutic and provides an opportunity for you to grow closer and hopefully feel more connected to that person. Knowing your limits and setting your limits. So if possible, doing what you can to help spread the responsibility by proactively asking for help and also being ready to accept assistance when offered. Making time for fun, so keeping up with those hobbies or activities that help to bring you joy. Prioritizing what must be done, and then knowing that it's okay to cry. It can be cathartic to have that emotional release sometimes. All right, time management. So time management might include creating a daily to-do list, doing the most important or difficult thing first, determining the must-dos and the would-be-nice to do, and becoming comfortable delegating to others. And part of delegating means letting go of that control aspect. Just a thought, but if you are always looking over the shoulder of the person who is helping you, that person is probably going to be a little less likely to offer help in the future. Decision-making may not immediately come to mind as a useful coping skill, but if you find that you have a tendency to waver, setting up criteria that all your decisions must meet might prove to be a very useful tool. So decision-making includes defining, clarifying the issue, working towards the solution that works best for everyone involved, and creating a plan of action. So essentially breaking down that larger goal into specific smaller steps that can be more easily accomplished. And finally, lifestyle management. So again, this includes exercising, eating nutritious foods. I know it can be very easy to reach for a handful of cookies when you need a perk, but try your best to fuel yourself with fresh fruits and veggies, lean proteins, healthy fats, although I think it's perfectly fine to reach for a cookie or two when the situation calls for it. Getting enough sleep. So most people are not getting enough sleep, and this directly impacts your mood, your energy level, and your ability to handle stress. Making time to relax. So you will be a stronger caregiver if you prioritize the activities that bring you joy. You might also consider incorporating some deep breathing or mindfulness meditations into your day. Sometimes shifting our perspective by learning to see the humor in situation. So many benefits to humor. Scheduling and keeping your doctor appointments. Using compassionate and positive self-talk. And developing and using a support system, an essential element in helping you not feel so alone. Building caregiver resilience. All right, so we know that caregiving is stressful, And the caregiving stress that you might be feeling is not all in your head, and the stress is also not your fault. As a caregiver, you need to develop some stress managing tools to help you deal with some of the stresses that will come your way and to build resilience. As Juliana shared, I'm a facilitator of a caregiver education and support program called Caring for You, Caring for Me. And this is a signature program of the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. And the curriculum covers several modules aimed at helping to build caregiver competence and confidence. And one of these modules discusses how to care for yourself and includes tips for building resilience and developing coping skills. And I wanted to share what is outlined in the curriculum because I think it is described in such a wonderful way. So the American Psychological Association, or APA, defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, threats, or other significant sources of stress, such as caregiving. I like to think of resilience more than the ability to bounce back, but as the capacity to actually bounce forward. The good news is that resilience is a skill that can be learned and developed. The American Psychological Association suggests that a number of factors impacts resilience, and these factors center around connections with others, nurturing your well-being, finding purpose, and embracing healthy thoughts. The most important element is having caring and supportive relationships that create love and trust. And I'm going to address the importance of prioritizing relationships and social support groups in a few moments. Other influences include the ability to make and carry out realistic plans. So developing some practical goals that you can accomplish and making regular progress towards your goals, even if it's baby steps. Maintaining a positive view of yourself. Having confidence in your strengths and abilities. Utilizing effective communication and problem-solving skills, and the ability to manage your impulses and feelings in a healthy manner. So what are some ways to help build resilience? The APA specifically suggests 10 strategies for helping to build resilience. Number one, make connections. So you want to keep up good relationships with close family members and friends. You want to accept help and support from others who care about you. Try to be active in civic, faith-based, or other local organizations, and do what you can to assist others in their time of need. Number two, avoid seeing crises as insurmountable problems. This is not always easy to do, especially if you are in a reactive mindset, but try your best to look beyond the present to see how future circumstances may be better. And as you deal with difficult circumstances, notice even the subtle ways in which you may already be feeling better as you deal with difficult circumstances. Number three, accept that change is a part of living. Try to increase your flexibility and understand that some goals may no longer be attainable. Learning to accept circumstances that cannot be changed may help you focus your attention on circumstances that you can change. Number four, move toward your goal. So develop realistic goals for yourself and break them into small, achievable tasks. This ties into decision-making and action planning, one of the coping skills that was shared. And you want to try to work towards accomplishing at least a small amount of progress towards your goal each day. Number five, take decisive actions. So act on adverse situations as much and as soon as you can. Try to take action rather than separating from problems and just wishing they would go away. And this goes back to being a coper and trying as best you can to be proactive rather than reactive. Number six, look for opportunities for self-discovery. So evaluate and reframe your adverse situations and look for ways in which you have grown through the process of dealing with them. Many people who have experienced intense personal hardships have reported better relationships, greater sense of self-strength, increased self-worth, and a more developed spirituality, in addition to a heightened appreciation for life. The silver lining may be the realization that you truly are a stronger person than you ever thought possible. Number 7, nurture a positive view of yourself. Develop confidence in your ability to solve problems and trust your own instincts. Keep up that positive self-talk. I am a strong person. I will get through this. Also, keep in mind that you've been successfully problem solving your whole life. And it's true that many of the scenarios you are facing now in your caregiving journey may be new to you, but try your best to approach the situation calmly, logically, and rationally. Number 8, keep things in perspective. So try to consider your stressful situation in a broader context and keep a long-term perspective. Try to avoid blowing unpleasant events out of proportion. Number 9, maintain a hopeful outlook. So work on visualizing what you want rather than worrying about what you fear. An optimistic outlook allows you to expect good things to happen in your life. And rounding us out at number 10, take care of yourself. So pay attention to your own needs and feelings. Participate in activities that you find enjoyable and relaxing, whether that be exercise, entertainment, or pampering yourself. Whatever it is that refreshes your body, mind, and spirit. So I had shared that in terms of building resilience, the most important element is having caring and supportive relationships that create love and trust. Even though caregivers are often physically not alone, many report feeling lonely. All of us need to grow and use support systems in our day-to-day life to help us manage stress and preserve a sense of well-being. For caregivers, this is another one of those essential fundamentals in a healthy caregiving relationship. So the people and groups or organizations that a person has contact with, either directly or indirectly, is called a person's support system. And social support can be provided in a few ways. The first is physical or practical assistance. So this might include help with transportation or maybe home-based care assistance. The second is resource and information sharing. So think of information that's available through the Fairfax County Department of Family Services or an organization like AARP. Third is emotional and psychological assistance. That's a person who you can openly talk to and who offers you encouragement. And the fourth is attitude transmission. So someone who helps you see the humor in situations, who can help you reframe things in a more positive light. There are many benefits to having a social support system, and these include reduced stress, decreased physical health problems, and better emotional well-being. And it might be helpful to think through the different categories and evaluate where your help is coming from. It might also help provide you with some awareness for where you may not ask for or accept help, or maybe even reasons why people may not be offering their assistance. You know, as supportive as friends and family may try to be, sometimes they just don't quite get or understand what you are experiencing on a regular basis. They aren't really sure how to help, or maybe you told them there's nothing they could do, so they stay away. The important thing to recognize is that you do not need to be on this journey alone. As was mentioned, one of the common side effects of caregiving is a feeling of isolation, but it is so important that you don't do this alone and recognize that support can come through a variety of different forms. All right, seeing the humor. So true story. The grandmother of a close friend of mine has Alzheimer's disease, and the decision was made to transition her into an assisted living facility. And Grandma Mary had a phone in her room, so family could call and chat with her, and she really enjoyed those conversations. She was also able to dial out to a few select loved ones, and she would often call her son Jim to ask when he would be coming to visit. So the conversation would go something like this. "Oh, Jim, I miss you so much. It's been so long since I last saw you. When are you coming to visit?" Meanwhile, Jim had been there the day before, but he would answer, "I miss you too, Mom. I'm going to come and visit you tomorrow." So one evening, Mary must have called Jim at least 5 or 6 times, having exactly the same conversation. And it got to the point where Jim's patience was starting to wear a little thin, but he didn't want to not answer the phone if his mom was calling. As Mary's room was right across from the nurse's station, Jim decided to call the nurse's desk to ask if the nurse could go to Mary's room and see if she could get Mary involved in some other activity. So Jim calls the nurse's desk and the phone is ringing, ringing, ringing. And finally, right before he's about to hang up, the phone is answered. And lo and behold, who answers? His mom, Mary. She answers, "Hello," to which Jim questionably asks, "Mom, is that you?" And Mary responds, "Oh, hi, Jim. This phone was ringing off the hook. I'm so glad you called. I miss you so much. When are you coming to visit?" Anyway, I hope that brought a little smile to your face. And needless to say, that is a favorite family story for my friend, and it has definitely become one of mine too. There are so many benefits to seeing the humor in a situation, although granted, not always the easiest to do. Humor really is an attitude, and it can be the perspective we use to view some of the challenging moments that we deal with. Again, it may not be in the immediate moment, but after the dust has settled and you have a chance to reflect on the situation, see if you can shift lenses or connect with that person who can shift lenses for you and try to see the humor. Humor eases tension, it diffuses negative emotions, it helps to relieve stress and sadness, it works up our immune system, and helps to release endorphins in the body, our natural painkillers. Humor can also help us to feel a sense of control. So by learning how to make light of some of the problems and tricky situations that we may face, we can obtain a sense of control and mastery over situations that would otherwise weigh us down with negative emotions. So I had shared or mentioned earlier that we all need to find whatever it is that will help to replenish us, to fill our tank, so to speak, so we can be the best caregiver to our loved one, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And sometimes when you are already juggling a lot, it might be a little more difficult to think of potential ways to care for yourself. So this visual of the self-care wheel was shared with me about a year or so ago, and I immediately printed it and tacked it up at my desk as a reminder of how to be good to myself. So the self-care wheel was created by a woman named Olga Phoenix, who is a trauma prevention expert. And she initially created the wheel to help herself lead a more balanced life, and then began using it with her other trauma patients. The wheel is made of 6 dimensions: psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional, and physical. And each of the dimensions represents areas of our lives that need regular attention. And as you can see here, there are a range of activities that you can do to help ensure that each area is receiving the nourishment it needs and deserves. Okay, the Caregiver Bill of Rights. So I think it's really important that every caregiver is familiar with the Caregiver Bill of Rights. And in case you have not seen it before, I hope it's something that really resonates with you. So the Caregiver Bill of Rights was written by a woman named Jo Horn in her book, Caregiving, Helping an Aging Loved One, way back in 1985. And although these were written over 30 years ago, the message still holds true, especially as the need for family caregivers becomes even more prevalent. And as we go through the list, give some thought to if you are exercising any of these rights. And if you're not, maybe identify 1 or 2 that you'd like to start with. So here we go. As a caregiver, I have the right to take care of myself. This is not an act of selfishness. It will give me the capability of taking better care of my loved one. I have the right to seek help from others, even though my loved one may object. I recognize the limits of my own endurance and strength. I have the right to maintain facets of my life that do not include the person I care for, just as I would if he or she were healthy. I know that I do everything that I reasonably can for this person, and I have the right to do some things just for myself. I have the right to get angry, be depressed, and express other difficult feelings occasionally. I have the right to reject any attempts by my loved one, either conscious or unconscious, to manipulate me through guilt, anger, or depression. I have the right to receive consideration, affection, forgiveness, and acceptance for what I do from my loved ones for as long as I offer these qualities in return. I have the right to take pride in what I am accomplishing and to applaud the courage it has sometimes taken to meet the needs of my loved one. I have the right to protect my individuality and my right to make a life for myself that will sustain me in the time when my loved one no longer needs my full-time help. And I have the right to expect and demand that as new strides are made in finding resources to aid physically and mentally impaired persons in our country, similar strides will be made toward aiding and supporting caregivers. So caregivers assume a very challenging role, but hopefully it is a role that will provide you with some very precious moments as well. For caregivers who have completed their journey, many share that although it may be difficult to identify in the moment when you're in the throes of it, caregiving was one of the most gratifying experiences of their life. Caregiving has the ability to change your perspective on life, and you should never underestimate the difference you are making, even if your efforts appear to go unappreciated at times. So make the effort, create moments of joy for your loved ones, but also take permission and create moments of joy for you. So the development of coping skills, in addition to a positive mindset, can help to make your caregiving journey more manageable. How you view a certain situation largely determines how you handle a situation. It is also so important to remember that you are more than a caregiver, and it is essential that you take the time to continue to grow areas of your life that you enjoy. Those small daily pleasures can really help provide balance to those times when you're in the position of managing uncomfortable and demanding situations or tasks. Finding ways to create those moments of joy for you are vital. You know, our take-home message is basic, but very profound at the same time. So the need for self-care is absolutely fundamentally necessary. Caregiving has the ability to teach us to live in the moment more fully. No matter the problems that you and your loved one may be facing, there are ways to enhance your sense of control and enjoyment of life, but you are in the driver's seat to make that happen. So focus on your abilities and assets, celebrate improvements, big and small. In a healthy caregiving relationship, you must acknowledge and embrace that there is the absolute need to address your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. This is not a, it would be nice to do, but it's a must do. And it really is a win-win. By caring for yourself, you are going to provide better care to your loved one. You are a priority, and never lose sight of that. All right, folks. So in addition, I just wanted to quickly share a few resource slides. So we have the contact information for the Fairfax County Aging, Disability, and Caregiver Resource Line. And this is really a great first step to assessing services for yourself or for your loved one needing care. Also, we have the option of ElderLink, my organization. ElderLink offers caregiver consultations free of charge. So this is a 1-hour opportunity to talk through a caregiving situation that you may be handling. And we can provide some insight, maybe some suggestions on how to handle the situation, or even just provide some reassurance that you already are on the right path. My contact information, please do not hesitate to reach out to ask any questions if you need clarification or would like any more information, either phone or email, and I'd be happy to support you how best I can. Okay, Juliana, I'm gonna lob it back over to you.
Thank you, Kristen. That was a great presentation. And at this point, we do have a few minutes, so we would like the audience to submit their questions. I do have a question from someone in the audience, and it says, I am the primary caregiver. In addition to doing almost everything for my mom, my siblings expect me to keep them up to date with detailed reports on how my mom is and what I'm doing about her. How can I get them off my back?
Yeah, so that is a stress that comes from, that perceived interference from other family members, and it's very, very common. Um, it's every family is certainly very unique in terms of the dynamics of how conversations go. But I think it's important for you to share with your siblings, I guess to share with them specifically what would be helpful for them in terms of if they're willing to lend assistance to the caregiving situation, if you could identify specific areas where they may be able to pitch in. So as you're giving them an update, if you could throw out to them, oh, it'd be great if you could help me with X, Y, and Z, to take a little more proactive approach to helping to share the responsibility with the family.
Thank you. We do have another question, and it says, I am a caregiver to my mother who has dementia, and I don't have family in the area. I don't have time for myself. What type of services does the county offer for someone like me, for someone in my situation, basically?
Sure. So, fortunately in Fairfax County, this is a great place to grow older. There are a plethora of different resources that may be available to assist you. So just a general overview, Fairfax County does offer a respite care program, and the intention of that program is to provide a break to the primary caregiver in the household. One of the requirements, though, is the caregiver cannot be working outside of the home. So depending on your situation, I'm not sure if this would be appropriate for you. But again, the general idea is an aide can come into the home to provide assistance with personal care, provide that companionship and supervision in order to give that primary caregiver a much needed break from their caregiving duties. Adult day health care is another option that may not be on the table at the moment, but hopefully there will be plans to reopen soon. So a daycare center is a place where your loved one can go during the day to receive additional stimulation. Their needs are certainly cared for, and it really helps to provide a caregiver with a nice solid break, having your loved one out of the home for a little while. And particularly this seems to work well for caregivers who may still be working, as a regular respite program is unfortunately not an option. But calling the Aging, Disability, and Caregiver Resource Line would be a great first step, so you can speak a little bit more specifically about your situation, or certainly I'd be more than happy to chat with you as well if you want to reach out to me directly.
Okay. Do you have the number for the Aging, Disability, and Resource Line? I
do. Let me back up here. It's 703-324-7948. And I also, the Insight Memory Care Center. So that is another wonderful resource in Fairfax County. It operates as a day program specifically for people who have cognitive impairment. So they do an absolutely wonderful job of programming to really help engage folks with memory impairment. They also offer a wide range of caregiver support. So that would be another helpful option to look into. And again, that's Insight Memory Care Center.
I see. Thank you. I think we may have a minute or two to answer another question. What is a good response when someone says, let me know if I can do anything to help? I am already tired and I don't have the energy to figure out things for them to do.
That's a great question. So when you do feel that you have a little more energy, go ahead and write down what would be helpful for people to help you with. So have a list ready to go. And when someone does ask the question, it's an easy reference to the list to see what areas they might be able to provide assistance. But I'm very glad you asked that question. That's actually a great suggestion for caregivers, is to have a list ready to go, the areas in their life where they could benefit from some additional support.
Thank you, Kristen. And we have a few other questions, which I will email to you, so hopefully you can get back to some people in our audience. And some people are writing that they are really grateful about the information that you have provided today. So thank you. And we are getting ready to wrap up. And as you signed out, there will be a brief survey. So please take a moment to answer those questions because those questions and the answers to those questions help us provide topics that you are interested in. And I also want to let you know that we do have 3 more webinars scheduled for this year. Our next webinar will be Diagnosis of Dementia, Now What? And it will be on Wednesday, September 9. So you are welcome to join us on that day. And Kristen, the information that you provided, as I mentioned, is been very, very valuable. And we will make sure to, we actually have emailed the PowerPoints, but if anybody else needs them, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to email them again. And so, you presented a really good way to approach this subject of caregiving stress. And so thank you. And thank you for giving us your time and your expertise. And to everyone else, thank you for being here today. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Bye now.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.